Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Zoom in.
She has
Yeah, well,
twin
we-
girls, so she understands what we're going through at every stage. And we're happy to have her again. She's going to speak about indulgence.
Do we quickly want to go around and have you tell me how many kids you have and how old they are? I think that's helpful for me to direct my comments towards you.
Hi, I'm Krishna. I have boy-girl twins. They're 3 1/4 years old.
Okay.
Mark, we have a 3.5-year-old Philip and 10 months old boy and girl twins.
I'm Peggy, his wife.
I'm Duncan. It's Christiana. We have twins. They're turning 3 at the end of the week. Boy, girl.
I'm Rocky. I have twin girls. They just turned 3, and that's it.
Okay.
Angeline and John. We have almost 4.5-year-old boy-girl twins.
I'm Kelly. I have 4-year-old twin boys.
Hi, I'm Shirley. I think I'm the oldest, 5.5 girls.
Okay.
Hans, I have boy-girl twins that are 4 and then a 1.5-year-old.
I'm Udell. I have twin boys that are almost 3, and I also have a 13-year-old.
Oh, okay. Just slide to your 13-year-old. Okay.
Hillary, twin girls, 2 years, 10 months.
And in the back row?
I'm Michelle. I have 2 girls who are 1.5 years.
I'm Richard and this is Andrea. We have boy-girl twins that are 4.5 years old.
I'm John, twin boys that are 13 months.
All right, so we have a lot of young ones except for your older one. But that's great that they're young because you can get off on the right foot with this at an early age, and that really helps. So we're talking tonight about what does it mean to overindulge children. Since giving to children is so instinctive, how could that possibly be a negative thing? Thank you. Most people think when I talk about this subject, I'm talking about kids who are just awash in all kinds of material things. But really, that's the least of it. There are so many more important areas where kids get overindulged that impact how they grow up and who they grow up being. It's the overindulgence that hinders a child's development that's problematic. If it fails to teach them how to get along in the real world and what to expect from the real world, that is a big problem. And this happens when parents give in a way that doesn't link effort and reward. If you give in response to your child's demanding or arguing or tantruming, that's a problem. It happens when you deprive children of important growth experiences, and we're going to talk more about that. It also happens when parents expect too little from their kids. Beyond getting good grades, which you're probably the only one involved in that right now, being excellent in their extracurricular activities, and being a little bit friendly towards you. If those are all your expectations, you'll find out that that's not enough. Probably everyone turned their phone off.
I use that one too.
Sorry about that. Okay. And it also happens when we don't expect the behaviors and attitudes that are going to help children be successful in the world beyond their home, where we're setting them up to fail because they don't have the attitudes and the behaviors that allow people to function in a way that they achieve their goals in life. Because in the real world, and the real world really starts when your child sets their first foot into preschool and you're no longer there with them. The real world is intolerant of bad behavior and bad attitudes, and it demands accountability. I always say that children who are raised in an overindulged home are kind of like animals who are raised in captivity, where their food is provided and their shelter is provided and they're protected. And after that animal is grown, if you were to turn them out into the jungle or the forest, how would they do? Not very well. They wouldn't have any survival skills. So you don't want to raise a child who isn't resilient, who doesn't have survival skills. Overgiving and underexpecting is a recipe for many undesirable characteristics. In fact, I call these kids victims of indulgence. Most people call them spoiled brats. But I think that that's so unfair because no child comes into the world spoiled. It's something we do to them. So they really are victims of this kind of behavior on the parents' part. Some of the characteristics that these victims of indulgence tend to have are, surprisingly, low self-esteem. Now you would say to yourself, why would somebody who's treated so well and so royally and gets everything they want have low self-esteem? The reason is, and you've heard this term, helicopter parents. When parents are always hovering, making sure that everything goes well for their child, that their child never has to struggle with anything or do something on their own and perhaps fail. This takes away the important building blocks of self-esteem, because self-esteem is built in part from the confidence you get from seeing that, number one, your parents believe you could do it. Secondly, the pride that a child gains in struggling with something and prevailing. And also the strength that children gain from trying something, and even if they fail at it, learning that they survive to try another day. Another characteristic of victims of indulgence is they have no sense of accountability and responsibility. The low expectations and the rescuing don't teach children that their choices have outcomes that they have to live with. So therefore, they don't learn to really weigh their choices very well. It affects everything from how they approach tasks to how do they interact with people, to later on, and this would be something you could think about, is keeping themselves safe as adolescents, because the choices they have to make as adolescents are scary ones. They're kind of life and death choices sometimes. Am I going to get in a car with someone who's been drinking? Am I going to try a drug that somebody offered me? If children don't learn early on that the decisions they make affect how their lives go, then they really are being endangered as adolescents. There's a handout here if you'd like to pick one.
Thank you.
Another problem these victims have is they have relationship difficulties and disappointments. You are their first model of what a relationship is like. And if that relationship is the other person gives and gives and gives and doesn't really expect anything back, that's not a good model for having relationships out in the world. They're going to expect similar treatment from other people, from their teachers, from their peers, from their coaches, from other people's parents. So victims of indulgence are often seen as sort of self-centered, bossy, or annoying, which can then lead to social isolation, because they haven't learned the skills to have successful reciprocal relationships. Another characteristic is they don't develop the work habits that lead to success. When parents intervene, what children don't learn is perseverance and a tolerance of frustration, which is something you really need to be successful in life. They also don't learn the problem-solving skills that help them tackle the challenges they encounter. Another characteristic is that the parent-child relationship is out of balance. overindulged, demanding children have too much power in the home. And not only is this scary for kids, but it deprives you of the ability to effectively guide them. If they don't listen to what you say because you don't establish yourself as an authority, it's very hard to direct them, to set rules and boundaries and limits that they're going to listen to. And this becomes more and more important as they get older. It also distorts for them their place in the world. If they have too much power at home, then they go into the classroom or the camp or someone else's home and expect to have the same power that they have with you, which they're not going to find. And they have also unhealthy attitudes towards possessions. They don't respect them, not theirs and not those of other people. Things that are easily acquired, and we know this as as adults. If you get something in the mail, it's a free sample of something, you don't particularly treasure it or appreciate it very much. But if you've saved up to buy something that you really wanted, that has a lot of value to you, and you treat it differently. So kids who are just showered with all kinds of possessions don't see those as having any value. In fact, I hear parents who say to kids who break their toys, that's okay, I'll get you another one. Sometimes, you're laughing, but I've heard it happen. Sometimes they'll go into schools, and I've had school directors say this to me, the kids don't treat the school possessions very well because they're used to the same response at home, that if it breaks, oh well, who cares, we'll just get another one. And finally, they end up with developing a sense of entitlement. They come to demand only and expect only the best. And when you finally have to set limits on what you want to give them or what you're able to give them, they're really angry with you because they figure you've changed the game on them. It used to be I could ask for anything and it was okay. Now I'm a little older and I'm asking for, $150 tennis shoes, and my parents are saying no, and what's the deal here? I'm supposed to get what I asked for. So often at this point in what I've described, a lot of parents are feeling sort of depressed and discouraged. Or they feel a sense of urgency to correct their behavior and avoid further overindulgence. But the first step in recovery from being an overindulgent parent is to recognize how and why you've gotten caught in the indulgence trap. I know anyone who comes out at night after a long day to hear somebody talk has the best of intentions. The people without the good intentions aren't here, or they didn't have babysitters. So you're certainly not spoiling your children on purpose. Why do you think parents overindulge? This is where you get to jump in.
Peace of mind, silence.
Okay, so to avoid the argument, saying yes.
I'm not guilty of that being.
You're talking about other people.
That's why I look like this.
It's easier to say yes than to say no.
Yeah.
Absolutely, especially at 5 o'clock. Guilt is a big one. Parents are guilty about all kinds of things. They're guilty because they work and they don't spend as much time with their child as they'd like. They're guilty because they're in a divorce situation and the child isn't growing up in an intact family. Sometimes parents feel guilty if they have adopted children. If your child has any kind of a disability, be it physical or a learning disability, parents can feel guilty about that. So for all those reasons, parents will sometimes overindulge their kids. What about other reasons?
as a reward. Like
I'm
if,
sorry?
Like as a reward, like if they act a certain way, or if we, go to a store and they don't act up, I say, oh, I'll give you,
Well,
a treat.
incentivizing
Yes,
is not
incentives.
the worst thing in the world, okay? And it does have its place. And that really isn't the kind of giving that's hurtful, because you've linked effort and reward when you do that, which is what you want to do.
Right.
So I would not count that among the reasons that parents overindulge.
Well, sometimes I do that, and I feel like I didn't really need to get them like a doll because they didn't freak out at the store. You know what I mean? That's just I feel like that should be the expectation, but yet I'm like adding a carrot where I really didn't need to.
Well, that's a good point, and it's something that you have to discern as to whether it's unnecessary, that your kids would just do the right thing anyway,
Right.
or whether you've been struggling with something and that you're trying to incentivize them.
Right.
What do you think are other reasons?
Peer pressure.
That's a big one. Parents feel a lot of pressure when they see other parents overindulging their kids. And you may not see it as much at the age that your children are now. But when they start getting into elementary school, when they start getting homework, when they start getting projects, you'll see projects come into a classroom that you would swear were built in some studio line because they're so perfect, and you just know the parents made this project. No kid could ever make it. And the parent thinks that they're doing their child a favor, but really not. Really, the message is, I don't think you could do a good enough job, so I'm going to take over. So, yes, there's pressure that way. There's peer pressure in that you see other parents buying certain items for their kids, and then your child wants them, and you think, well, how can my child be the only 3-year-old with that 10-speed bike? That would be outrageous. What about other reasons?
Giving your kid more than what you had.
Exactly. Forgive me. A lot of the giving we do is to is to make up for things that we didn't have in our own childhood. Those could lozenge. Anyone have a lozenge?
It's coffee flavored. Or
Oh, I love it.
Yay.
And soup.
Christina, the rescue.
Thank Okay, this is perfect.
Soothing and
If there were things that you wanted when you were a child, or some kind of attention or help that you wanted that you didn't get, giving it to your child almost feels like giving it to yourself and making up for what you didn't have. So that's a very common reason.
It's way cuter in a 3-year-old size or whatever. Yeah, you're right.
What about other reasons?
Seeing your child happy if you give something.
Yes, parents are very involved with pleasing their children. And I'm going to talk a lot about that. That the gratification that you get from seeing them smile and give you a big kiss, it can be the reason that you do something. And it doesn't have to be a material thing. It could be helping them with something. And the sense of relief that they feel from that can gratify you. Sometimes parents get caught up in what I call the indulgence decathlon, where parents within a family compete to see who can be the favorite parent, who's most lenient, who buys the most presents, who gives the most help. And it's even worse if you're in a divorce situation where the parents compete with each other. As if a child should love one parent more than the other, which is ridiculous. The problem with this indulgence decathlon is that no matter how hard you try, you can't win because the grandparents have it locked up. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. They tend to overindulge kids, but hopefully in a more minimal way than parents are able to. The good news is that it's not too late to unspoil your kids. Children are both resilient and forgiving. I think the most helpful thing I heard when I was raising my kids was that there's no mistake you can make with your child that you can't undo if you realize that you made the mistake. They're very forgiving about it. If you have an adolescent, it may take a little longer to undo that, a little more explaining. You might have to introduce it a little more slowly. But with your young children, they're ready to forgive you right away. Now, you can undo any path of indulgence that you're on if you follow the 13-point roadmap that I've given you. Some of these points are meant to revise how you think about your role as a parent. Others are specific procedures, rules, and actions. I will tell you that none of them are overnight remedies. They're not meant to be. They're meant to be a new way of parenting. But all of them can contribute to creating an environment in which children flourish and grow into productive, responsible, confident, happy, successful adults. So I want to go through these 13 points with you. First of all, you need to be parental. I hear parents say to me all the time, but I want to be my kid's pal. I want to be their friend. No, your kids are going to have a lot of friends. They're only going to have 2 parents. And you have to stand firmly in that role. You can have fun with them, you can laugh with them, you can joke with them, but ultimately, you are the authority in the household, not them. You need to think of your family not as a democracy, but as a benevolent dictatorship. They've done studies on what kind of parenting is most effective, and turns out the kind of children I know that you want to turn out. And that is parents who are firm but loving, who take an authoritative role but are still loving. If you switch either of those components, you get dysfunction in the children. So one of the things that you can do tomorrow is have this little discussion with your kids. Sit your children, because you all have multiple, sit your children down and say to them, do you realize that there are kids' decisions and grown-ups' decisions? When you were just a baby, you got to make hardly any decisions. You got to decide when you were going to eat, when you were going to sleep, when you needed to be held. And now you're 3 or 4 or 5, and look at all the decisions you get to make. What do you want for breakfast? What are you wearing to school? Who do you like to play with? What's your favorite color? And you can go on and on with decisions that they're already making at 3. And say to them, the older you get, the more decisions you're going to get to make, which is true. If you're a good parent, you're slowly writing yourself out of the script over the years. So by the time your child gets out of high school, they're making all or almost all of their own decisions. That's good parenting. But it starts slowly. So you have this very brief conversation with your child about adult and kids' decisions. Then later in the day, you say to them, okay, it's time to get in the bath. And they do their usual, I don't want to get in the bath, I'm not getting in the bath, I'm running away, I'm lying down and screaming. It's very effective after this discussion to say to them, Getting in the bath is a grown-up decision. The toys that you take in the bath with you is your decision. And believe it or not, kids go, that makes perfect sense. And they go along with it. Okay. Point number 2. You need to acknowledge the difference between pleasing children and loving children. And this goes to what you were talking about making them happy. It's very easy to please children. Give them what they want, let them do what they want, and they will be very pleased. Being a loving parent is harder. Pleasing is tempting because it avoids a lot of painful and exhausting conflicts with your child. So you can say yes to ice cream for breakfast. You can say, no, you don't have to clean up, I'll do it for you. You can say, yeah, go to bed whenever you feel like it. And you will have a very pleased child. But will you have been a loving parent? No, because the loving parent says, you can't have ice cream for breakfast because that's not nutritious. And you do have to clean up your stuff because that's something you need to learn to do. It's your responsibility. And indeed, there is bedtime in this household because you need to get enough sleep to be able to go to school tomorrow and be fresh and enjoy your day. Now, are they going to be pleased when you say that? No. That's when they say, hate you, you're the meanest parent in the world, I'm moving down the street where the parents are nicer. If you get intimidated by those responses, you are dead in the water as a parent. Because you cannot use your child's face as a barometer of whether or not you're being a good parent. Because often when they have an unhappy face is when you're being the best parent, and when they have a happy face is when you're being an overindulgent, not very good parent.
They're just crying all the time.
Their unhappiness is not evidence of parental cruelty. It's just them learning to deal with frustration, that everything can't go their way. And that's a very good lesson for kids to learn. So don't be afraid to say no. You can empathize with their feelings, but you need to be firm. I understand you like ice cream for breakfast. Ice cream is yummy, but it's not good for breakfast. And don't entertain endless discussions, because sometimes they'll get a back and forth going with you. At some point after you've explained yourself, you need to say, I'm all done talking about this. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm not going to discuss it anymore. And if you talk to me about it, I'm not going to answer you. I'll answer you about anything else, but not this. Okay, point number 3. No more freebies. And believe me, I understand what that's like. You're out in the world, you see something your child would like, you know it would make them happy. And so you bring it home and you give it to them. Don't you wish somebody would do that for you? That'd be great. But the problem with it is it doesn't link effort and reward. It's not at all attached to the real world system of compensation for effort. And
When do you start being able to implement this, or when can kids understand that? Because my girls are 1.5 years, so how much can they do to earn a reward? Like we, bring home something that they like, a toy that they have at daycare, buy it so they can do it at home. They didn't have to do anything for it. So at what point do you think we stop doing that?
What you have to remember is that receptive language develops before expressive language. So your children understand a lot more than they can say. So if you decide to get them something, you can tie it to effort. You can say, you guys have really been putting your toys away nicely. And so this is a little reward